Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Monday, June 1st, 2020. We survived May, barely, but we did survive it. Let's check out our space weather section today on thegrandsolarminimum.com and also here at the Space Weather News Station. Right now, our solar wind speed's coming in at 371.7 kilometers per second with a density of 4.8. Believe it or not, we are 30 days in a row without a sunspot. That region up there in the northeastern limb is not a sunspot. It did not have dark cores, therefore it does not qualify as a sunspot. So now that's 120 days without sunspots in 2020, 79% of the year now without sunspots. But 30 days in a row, this is one of the longer streaks that we've had this year. We usually get around 30 to 34, and then we see a sunspot. But are there signs that the minimum is finally starting to wind down? Are we seeing signs of solar cycle 25 waking up? We'll get to that here just in a minute. Our TCI, Thermosphere Climate Index, is at a 2.95. KP indices right now currently are sitting at a 1 and a 2. So we are back to quiet conditions again. Let's go over to the Grand Solar Minimum page here at the Space Weather section. And let's take a look here. First, the solar flares. We had some action over the weekend. I'll talk about that here in a minute. Right now, nothing really happening. And if we look at our star as the big picture here, you'll see that northeast region has breached the eastern limb. But look at this in the backside. This is important to note. I haven't seen that much action on the backside beyond the eastern limb in some time. Now, this could be a usual thing that we have, which is all these bright active areas. They pierce the eastern limb, and they don't amount to anything. So we've had 30 days without sunspots for that reason. This little active region here, actually, we thought this was going to be a sunspot for sure. It was hurling B-class and M-class flares. But as it breached the eastern limb, which is right about here, this is our eastern limb where my arrow is, fake line, nothing formed, just like the last one. And now we have an active region down here that's beyond the eastern limb. That could be our next sunspot. Again, this is also in solar cycle 25 locations. And then we got some peppered activity back here even further beyond. So a lot of activity happening right now, and really nothing to amount for as far as sunspots or coronal holes. I do want to say this. We had solar wind speeds increase of 371. When we did a show on Thursday, solar wind speeds were at 290. We were expecting increased solar wind speeds, and I was saying 450 to 500 kilometers per second. And we are not seeing that kind of wind speed right now from our sun. So there are other things to see here that are saying we are still in a deep minimum. For one, solar wind speeds. When you have increased solar wind speeds that don't even pierce 400, that's a very, very weak event. That's the first and foremost. Number two, even these bright active regions, these proto sunspots, which we've seen two now back to back in 2 separate weeks, they don't form dark cores. Yes, we had some minor B-class flares, but still, nothing to show that cycle 25 is officially started. Now, there is some action here on the backside, and this is the most action we've probably seen on the sun in the last 3 years, since the decline, I should say. So there are some indications that do show that the sun could be making its first steps towards solar cycle 25, but that doesn't mean the minimum is over when the cycle 25 starts up. No, just like how it got to this point, we stepped down gradually from 2016, 2017, 18, and 19. We saw solar activity decline. Now, the declination of this was extreme, in my opinion. It was fast, and it took 3 years, but it still happened faster than some scientists were predicting. Now, I know some of you out there probably hope that the sun comes back at the same speed that it dropped. I don't see that. If you follow Valentina Zarkova's work, I don't see the sun gaining any strength at this time right now. Not for a long time. In fact, none of us that are watching this broadcast right now will not be alive to see the sun go back to some kind of a normalcy of maximum strength. We won't be alive, period. And that's okay with me at this point. We're about 1,000. We're about 1,000. Well, wait, we're in the second grand cycle, so we're about 600 years away from when we get to the maximum peak of the magnetic field strengthening, and then the next 1,000 years after that, it goes back on the decline. When we get to year 2000, I'm talking from now, we are starting, which would be about 3 more, after this grand cycle, there's 3 more grand cycles coming up. Once we get to that point, at the 2,000-year cycle, now we're at the bottom, the lowest point of the sun's magnetic connections. So today's talk, I have a couple articles today. I have some weather headlines and stuff like that, stuff that's related to grand solar minimum, but we need to talk about grand solar minimum because there's a lot of people out there who are confused, who do not report on grand solar minimum properly, and there are folks out there who are opportunists to try to take this topic and twist it and make it worse or something and it's not. The facts. Let's start there. Grand solar minimum is a period of low solar activity over several cycles, anywhere from 3 to 5, just depends. All right. Grand solar minimums, they cause shorter grow seasons. They have longer winters. With grand solar minimum, you have more cosmic radiation, more cloud nucleation, more cloud cover, causes cooling, more precipitation in the atmosphere because we have highly charged particles that basically conduct themselves as magnets to water vapor and form these super droplets. So we have crop loss, we have floods, we have record snows, we have record cold temps, and yes, we have record heat temps. Forget about the weather for a minute. That's just a piece of the grand solar minimum. The other piece is the volcanoes and the earthquakes and all the other geological events that happen during these times. So you take all this up and you put it in a big bowl and you mix it up, and what do you get? It's a very complex system. There's no one quick answer for this. And all we have to go on is history. We look back at the Maunder minimum and we've seen what happened. We look back at the Dalton minimum and we've seen what happened. This is grand cycle number 2. So let's clear this up. A super grand solar minimum started in the Maunder minimum. A super grand solar minimum is a 2,000-year cycle filled with grand solar minimums. 10 to be exact. 5 grand cycles of 350 years to 415. We are just now starting the second grand cycle of this super grand solar minimum. So after this grand solar minimum, the next grand solar minimum, and the one after that, we will start to see the sun's magnetic field start to reverse and get back to 0 like we saw in the Maunder minimum, which will take another 1,000 years. So when you hear scientists, reputable scientists out there saying that they're predicting this grand solar minimum to be somewhere between a Dalton and a Maunder, that's absolutely 100% fact. If you follow Valentina Zarkova's work. If you agree with Valentina Zarkova, then you can't say that this grand solar minimum is going to be stronger than the Maunder minimum. Because according to Valentina Zarkova, the super grand solar minimum cycle began at the Maunder minimum. And learning from her paper, and it's all in her work, guys, and the first 1,000 years of the super grand solar minimum, from the day the Maunder minimum started until the next 1,000 years, the magnetic connection, the field, the sun strength is slightly improving through each grand cycle. Once you get from the 1,001 years to the next into that cycle to 2000, that's when things get on the decline again, and the next super grand solar minimum will start off like it did in the Maunder minimum. At least that's in theory, and we can line that up with history and charts. So for all of those people out there who claim that this is going to be an ice age, that this is going to be glaciation, that this is going to last for 100 to 400 years, it's simply not true. They just don't understand. And what's funny is that I don't have a degree in this. I'm a researcher. I'm a reporter. I take everything that I read and learn and put it together. I have my producer, Mari, who also does a lot of reading for me. She helps me with these papers all the time. Trust me on that. Mari does the majority of the reading. But based on Valentina Zarkova's work, we are not looking at a grand solar minimum that's going to be an ice age or even a mini ice age, folks. Are we going to see cold weather? Absolutely. Now, it's possible that Valentina's work, there are some holes in it. It's possible that we get geological events that push us further into a colder epoch, or epoch, I should say. It's possible. A big volcanic eruption like Tambora, maybe once, maybe twice, and that makes it officially stronger than Maunder minimum. Maybe. That would be a freak incident. Now, does that mean that we don't have anything to worry about? Absolutely not. Go get the book Upheaval by John Casey. Everything I've read up halfway through that book, and everything in that book so far is accurate to the T. So we still have a lot to get through before this grand solar minimum is over. And what is a grand solar minimum? Again, several cycles of lower solar activity. It steps down gradually, just like the solar cycle. When it starts, it goes up to a max and then comes back down to a very whatever kind of minimum at the end of the 11-year cycle. So these 11-year cycles start at the bottom of a minimum and they go up gradually to a max and then go back down by the end of the 11-year cycle. So we're going to have about 3 to 5 of those cycles during this current grand solar minimum. Zarkova thinks 2055, so that would be 3.5 cycles, or that would actually be about 3 cycles exactly, which lines up with where we are on the super grand solar minimum scheme of things. So what I'm saying here is that it's impossible, based on, if you say you support Valentina Zarkova's work, and if you actually understand her paper, you would know that the predictions of a Dalton, between a Dalton and a Maunder minimum are accurate. It's possible we could repeat a Maunder minimum like grand solar minimum, and then maybe the next grand cycle we'll see a more of a Dalton minimum because we're getting close to that peak of the strength of this magnetic field from the sun. But the claims that I've seen on YouTube all spring long and last winter was no plant 2020, no plant 2020. We had a bad year at 18, we had a bad year in 19, and just like me last fall predicting that we would be dealing with winter conditions as rough as the 78, 79 winters, I was wrong. I was wrong. See, there's nothing precise about or predictable about solar cycles. Same thing with climate. I've mentioned this with Joe Bastardi. He made a prediction one time because the MJO was lining up exactly the same way it did a few years back. Same situation with El Nino, and we thought we were going to see this crescendo of cold and snow back in January of 19. It didn't happen. Not his fault. Not his fault. Climate and everything else, it's got several layers. So just because we look back at history and we say, well, this is what happened that time, so this will probably happen this time. Maybe. It's a 50-50 shot. But if you say you support Zarkova's work and you understand her work, then you understand that we are in the second grand cycle of this super grand solar minimum, that we are actually on the uptick. as we see weaker magnetic connections. Yes, we are still recovering from the worst of the grand solar minimums, which was the Maunder. We're still recovering from that. So, again, I have seen so many terrible interpretations of super grand solar minimum. People think that means that's the strength of this solar minimum, this grand solar minimum. That's not the case, period. So what are we going to see? Each decade. This decade is the beginning, 2020s. We're going to have a weak max the next couple of years. Weak, half of the strength that we saw in solar cycle 24. And then we go back into a deeper part of this minimum. And the max in solar cycle 26 won't even be as strong as 25. And predictions all the way through 27 cycle is where we see the bottom of the grand solar minimum at the beginning of cycle 27, and at the end of 27 into 28 is when we will finally start to see the sun come out of a grand solar minimum, and we should start seeing normal activity from the sun, solar cycles 28 and beyond. Now, that is just based on what Zarkova's paper says. I know the truth doesn't sell. Everybody wants to see the fear. Everybody wants to hear that we're going to die in 2 years, that we're going to have martial law. It's going to be iced over everywhere. You're not going to be able to get food. You better load up on your guns. That's what I know. That's what sells on YouTube. I get it. It's sad. Just yesterday, we aired a special on growing. And the view counts, I don't know if it's being suppressed or if people just don't want to put the work in. Because what Jesse had to say about growing is very vital for many reasons. Even if we're not going to go through a food shortage. Folks, look what's happening around the world right now. Wouldn't it be a great thing, whether we're going through a grand solar minimum or not, to know how to grow, to know how to can your own food, to know how to store, how to be conservative, not be wasteful? Food prices were going up because of COVID-19. Who knows what's going to happen to food prices now? Who knows? So I want to thank each and every one of you that's watching right now, and all of you that subscribe to the Grand Solar Minimum channel, because you're going to get the truth here. You're going to get the facts. You're not going to get some kind of sensationalized title or end of the world scenario from this channel. You're going to get the truth about climate and about space weather. That's what you're going to get the truth on. Crops as well. If they're bad, I'll report it. If they're good, I'll report it. If we're hot, I'll report it. If we're cold, I'll report it. But I promise you guys, you will not see sensationalism on this channel. There won't be any exaggeration, not with Mari in the house. I'll tell you what, you can't put anything out. That woman will vet the hell out of it. And 9 times out of 10, thank God, I don't react compulsively on certain things on the internet, because we would be laughed at. But I've got Mari as my peace of mind. She's my gravity. She's my reasoning. And I get to see a different side of every story. And thanks to her, we talk and bounce things off and come to conclusions. So I know I'm ranting a little bit here about the Grand Solar Minimum, but there's so much confusion. And we get a bad name because of people out there who fear this up, who falsely promote Grand Solar Minimum for their own profit. And when that doesn't work out, they move on to different topics. They don't talk about it anymore because they can't figure out how to make money. Let me tell you something about Grand Solar Minimum topic. There's no money involved with this right now. Okay? And it's not making enough money for some of these fear channels, so they have to make up things to make it sound worse, to get the views, to get the clicks. I'm very proud of this channel. I'm very proud of our subscribers. Everybody that's here on a normal basis and people that comment regularly are very kind, very intelligent, and have critical thinking abilities. Hell, I don't even need moderators in this chat, because if anybody ever came in here and tried to start trouble and tried to debunk what we talk about here and try to say we're junk science, every single one of you, for the most part, you guys are intelligent enough and smart enough to silence that person and show them that you're not going to tolerate that kind of nonsense on this channel. That's what I love about this channel. The supporters that do show up on a regular basis. The people that are here that want to find out what's going on with our planet. They want the truth. There's enough fear going on right now out there. People are scared all over the world. And what's bad is that you go to YouTube and people think that the answers are on YouTube. And I'm here to say there's only 5% truth, in my opinion, on most communities about anything on YouTube. Every community has their sensationalists. Every community has the truth. I'd like to say this channel is part of the truth. Are we going to have some challenges during the Grand Solar Minimum? Absolutely. Who knows what's lying ahead of us? We have no idea how bad it's going to get. We do know it's going to be bad. We do know that we have to prepare for the possibility of food shortages. We do have to prepare for that possibility of a power grid going down because of a solar storm. We do have to prepare for colder winters and shorter grow seasons. Those are still problems. But when you look at some of the topic out there, and they act like that this is going to be an ice age, a mini ice age. All it takes is one channel to provide the wrong information, and the opposition will grab a hold of that message only and throw it back in your face every time we don't have a freezing temperature. Because there are nut jobs out there who are pushing conspiracy theories, who are pushing exaggerations. They don't want to take the time to do the work, to do the real studying. They see the work, they skim through it, they grab the words that sound the best to them in fearing people. And that's how they run their channels. When Super Grand Solar Minimum talk came out and Valentina Zarkova had to have slides blurred out, remember when everybody in the community thought, oh my God, she's saying we're going to have a Super Grand Solar Minimum. They had no idea what she was talking about. But yet they made websites, they made videos, they told everybody that this is going to be super cold period of time, blah, blah. But they didn't know until June of 2019 when the paper was finally published in nature.com. And by the way, the retraction that's on the paper right now is over some information that even if it was corrected the way that these people wanted it corrected, it would not make that big of a difference. So I've noticed some people have left the chat since I've started this, and that's fine, because the people that left this chat are the ones that fear, and they want that fear, and they can't live without that fear. They have to have something to fill that void. You're not going to find it here. You're going to find sensible people with intelligent decision-making abilities and the ability to communicate with each other without name calling, without insulting each other, with understanding and tolerance. And I think it's crucial for the education of the Grand Solar Minimum in this topic that people stop with the BS, stop with the fakery, stop with the lies, just pull from the facts. That's what this channel's been doing for years. We've based everything that we've done, live shows, videos we make, stuff on our website, everything is factual. There is nothing on our website at thegrandsolarminimum.com that is a lie, that is false, that is inaccurate. And that's a hard thing to claim, but there's been a lot of hard work that goes into this website of vetting information, making sure we're putting the correct information out there. So, if you guys appreciate this channel, keep sharing it. Keep spreading the word about Grand Solar Minimum. If you can, buy a t-shirt from us, donate to us, super chat us, whatever. This channel is ran off of your guys' power. And we're not going to change our format to get more scarier, to get more views, to get more money or anything like that. No. We're going to go ahead and stick with what we're doing. The truth will prevail. We'll be taken care of. Everything comes back around. I really believe that. So, again, thank you for listening through this. Again, guys, I'm only going through this because I'm tired of seeing certain channels out there who you got to have, there's that saying out there, you got to have money to make money, right? And I think there's a couple people out there who don't play fair and spend a bunch of money into things that gives you more views, that gives you more subs, just to build up that pot. They're more interested in being controversial and daring and scaring people than they are telling the truth and just reporting the accurate information. Sometimes the accurate information comes off as scary. I can't help that, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you need to move if you live in Minnesota. You need to move if you live in Maine. I'm not going to sit here and tell you people to relocate. There are people out there that will tell you that. I want to see 100% proof that there's going to be glaciation, because right now all we have is proof from history, from ice cores. So what we're doing is taking historic information and modeling it with what's happening right now. This is kind of how we can kind of guide ourselves through this period of time, looking back at the past and seeing what they went through and how things were then, and putting it all together and moving forward. I think right now with what's happening all over the world, a lot of folks are probably losing focus on climate. There's a virus, there's unrest, and the combination that this weather situation that we're going through over the next several decades can change the landscape of how we grow, how the food chain will be supplied. There's some serious concerns without having to fear this up. But there's so many people out there who think they know what a grand solar minimum is, and it gives a bad name for the rest of the people who actually know what it is. So, all right, guys, let's get into a couple of headlines. I don't have a lot to go over today, but I thought today I really wanted to talk a little bit about the basics of grand solar minimum and where we are, the strength of this one coming up. Yes, this one could be between a Dalton and a Maunder minimum, right there in the middle between the two. Based on Zarkova's work, based on what she says, and if you follow it, there's no way you can gather that we're going to have a Maunder minimum or worse in the next 3 to 4 decades. And that's my rant. That's my words, and I'm sticking to it. All right, so we had some decent news over the weekend. Let's start with Saturday. NASA astronauts launch from America in a historic test flight of SpaceX Crew Dragon. This is important. Very important. This is the first time in 9 years since we have seen a rocket launch from American soil. This is the first step in figuring out if we are definitely going back to the moon, which, by the way, I think everybody should check out the show on Netflix. If you want to get away from all this craziness out there, go to Netflix. There is a show called Space Force, and it's absolutely hilarious. Steve Carell is a general, a 4-star general. Just a bunch of other actors and actresses that are well known. Very good show. But anyway, the point is, SpaceX, we're back in space. Successfully docked with the International Space Station 19 hours after the launch. These guys will be up there for a couple months doing their tests and everything, and then they'll come back to Earth. I don't think they'll want to at this point. But this was very historical. I actually gathered my children from their video game playing and their screen time and said, you guys need to sit down and watch this. This is historic. And I remember being my son's age and my stepdaughter's age, the last time I saw a live rocket launch, it was the Challenger. And what a disaster that was. So to watch this kind of with your breath held, because we haven't had astronauts lifted off into space from America in a long time. It was good to see that it went without a hitch. Amazing technology, how far we have actually come. Look at the size of this rocket. With ease, we had a launch. With ease. So this could be the future of space travel. But let's hope they're taking into effect that we're experiencing higher, and this is the worst time for us to start space travel. Now, here's where I find it ironic that they want to go to Mars by 2024. Well, I'm here to tell you that we'll be close to a solar max in 2025. So the cosmic radiation is going to be down slightly and could allow a 9-month trip to Mars without fears of high exposure to cosmic radiation. So I find it odd, or not odd, but ironic that they are scheduling this so-called mission right around the time where we could see less space radiation. But don't get it twisted. It's not going to be that big of an improvement. Again, solar cycle 25 is expected to be half the strength of the max of 24. And 24 was well below average. So you make up your mind, I guess, right? Moving on from space, Tropical Storm Amanda hits Guatemala and El Salvador, leaving at least 11 people dead. Very heavy rain falling across Central America. Tropical Storm Amanda formed around 900 UTC on May 31st, 2020, as the first named storm of 2020 in the Pacific hurricane season. At the time, the storm was about 55 miles south of Guatemala City. Now, Guatemala, just 3 hours later, Amanda made landfall in the southeastern Guatemala with maximum sustained winds. If I can get this out. I'm all wound up today on coffee and stuff. But we're talking about winds of 40 miles an hour. What the bigger story about this is the rain. The people overflowing rivers, sweeping buildings away. 11 people have been killed. But the majority of the rain, look at the radar here on this too. Jeez. Lots of water vapor, right? Sure. Also, lots of highly charged particles in our atmosphere that are help producing all this abundance of rain. And they're getting pounded right now. And watch out for the Gulf Coast, and I'll get into that here in a minute. Amanda, the remnants of Amanda will be picked back up in the Gulf. We'll get to that just in a second. And I should have mentioned this before the tropical storm, but first M-class solar flare of the solar cycle 25. This was an M1.1. It happened on Saturday, May 29th. Now, Mari was telling me this is the first M-class solar flare that we've seen since October of 2017. So a lot of folks would like to look at that as a highlight of when solar cycle 25 actually began and started going up again. Maybe. We'll see. But they did report on it. We had a flurry of action from this star, or from this action right here from this region. The northeastern part produced few B-class flares, and then that M1.1. Again, thanks to Watchers.news for covering this type of stuff, solar weather. Even though we had this solar flare activity, even the Watchers.news also quoting, we are still in a deep solar minimum, pointing out that our sun has been spotless for 79% of the year. So good to see that we're not getting that hype from Watchers.news that, oh my God, the sun's awake, here comes the solar maximum. No, not yet, guys. Settle down. 87,000 lightning strikes in Washington on Saturday, nearly 2/3 of the annual average. And on top of that, we had at least 15 wildfires that were blamed on these lightning strikes. So before it hit Washington, we had it in Alaska, and it's igniting wildfires now. Why so much lightning? I'll tell you why. And I sound like a broken record, but it's the truth. Highly charged particles. Our atmosphere is supercharged. Supercharged. And when you're talking about a supercharged atmosphere, when you see the lightning, I mean, you guys can see it. We didn't have frequent pictures like this on a regular basis. Absolutely stunning. It reminds me of the diagrams of when cosmic rays come down and affect the diagrams, the animation they give for cosmic radiation when it comes to Earth's atmosphere, the way it sprinkles and trees out and rains down, it almost makes me feel like these lightning bolts are following in the paths of cosmic radiation being dispersed amongst the atmosphere. That spider web looking thing there. I could be just, speculating too much, but that's what it feels like. So highly charged particles are the blame for all this lightning. And two-thirds of the annual lightning strikes happening in one day? That's not global warming, folks. Man has nothing to do with charging up the atmosphere. Man has nothing to do to putting highly charged particles in the atmosphere. You have no idea the science that's involved in these particles. When Lee Wheelbarger first taught me about highly charged particles and how they work, they're tiny, but they go through everything. They go through you. They go through our atmosphere, to the ground, into the ground, to the core. There is where we get everything like the magma, the charged up underneath, the earthquake movement. It's because our core is being bombarded by these highly charged particles. But it's going to take hours to explain everything when you're talking about earthquake and volcanic activity being related to the sun. I can just point you in the right direction is all I can do. But I can tell you right now, when you look at all these lightning strikes, next time you say man's making the planet sick, look at all these storms. You ask that person who blames man for climate change. Ask them, why are we seeing all this lightning? What's man putting in the atmosphere that's causing all this lightning? We've never seen this much lightning before. Not in the last 200 years anyway. And I bet you they can't come up with an answer. Or they'll try to, that's CERN or that's HARP, or weather modification, geoengineering. Okay. Look, I believe weather engineering is possible. It's just not on the large scale that everyone thinks it's on. That's my only disagreement with that. More information on Amanda, leaving all kinds of flooding. Look at this heavy rain here. Jeez. So what's relevant about Amanda is that the remnants of Amanda is going to form Invest 93L. If it becomes a tropical storm, it'll be Cristobal. Now, we're already, June 1st is the official start to the season. We don't really get ramped up until July 1st, but this is technically the beginning where we see early hurricanes as possible. But go over here to Mike's weather page, spaghettimodels.com. If you want all the information on how to follow this storm, this is where you go. And I want to shout out to him once again. We'll be on this page a lot this year. So there's Amanda, the remnants of it anyway, right there at the bottom. But we're talking about formation somewhere in here in the next 5 days at 80% chance. In fact, let's go over to that map. Let's read what we have to see here. Large area of disturbed weather associated with the remnants of Eastern Pacific Tropical Storm Amanda is located over the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. The disturbance is forecast to move northwestward over the southeastern portion of the Bay of Campeche later today or tonight, with environmental conditions are expected to be conducive to support development, and a new tropical depression is likely to form within the next day or so. The system is then forecast to drift west or west-southwest over the southern Bay of Campeche through the middle of the week. Interest along the coast, and it lists off the areas here that could be affected. I'll show you guys that here just in a second on what we're thinking about Invest 93. 80% chance or 80% chance of a development is very, very possible. And this could be the beginning, for sure, of our hurricane season. Now, I'll go over here to one of my favorite web pages for GFS long-term outlooks. Let's check out temperature waters, or temperatures here in the waters. Okay, so definite improvement as far as hurricane weather being supported in these waters. Before last week, we still had lots of cooler waters on the Gulf Coast. Now we're starting to see that change. This region where Invest 93 is going to be starting, right here where my arrow is, naturally, it's in a favorable condition to develop. If this area continues to warm up, that's going to be bad news. And I'll show you why here in a minute. While we're at this page, let's check out also El Nino 3-4. Still cool. Now, it is a little bit warmer near Hawaii, which it's supposed to be at this time of year. But still trending on that La Nina side. It's bounced back a little bit to 0.305 below baseline. It fell below La Nina. It fell over La Nina issues, actually. The North Atlantic. Again, we are entering the summer months in this region of the world, and temperatures are plummeting. They came back on a little bit of a rebound in the beginning of May. The second half of May, they have dropped below levels they were in March, when it was still winter in this region. Thank you, Wood Spirit 98. We really appreciate the donation. Again, it's folks like you that help make this channel go. And everything helps. So it's not a matter of you have to donate a certain amount of money. No. Anything you guys put in shows me you care. I don't care if it's 5 cents. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So let's go to the GFS outlook, shall we? Take a look at this storm that could be Cristobal. And I would go to our weather page, but we got a copyright issue for
Just have the map on it.
for the clouds when it was up by itself. It's crazy. Anyway, so if you guys look down here in the Gulf, there's the remnants of Amanda and Invest 93 starting to get wound up. And here's a high pressure system. Now I want you guys to notice this. This high pressure system where my arrow is. This high pressure system will move back over to the middle of the Atlantic, but it's going to drag up moisture from the tropics into the Gulf, into the United States, and we are going to see some pretty decent rains coming out of this. This is today, starting today. Pretty quiet, high pressure across the eastern part of the United States. We could use it. We've had some rough weather lately. Some showers and storms coming across the Great Lakes into western New York by Tuesday, but still pretty quiet for the lower 48 as we start to see some showers develop in Florida. And then Invest 93 trying to get its act together. And by June 4th, June 5th, we start to see a little bit of movement with the moisture moving through the Gulf into Florida along the coast. And there it is by Saturday, June 6th. Look at this low pressure system. Now, the placement on this is still early. We still got some time. This is Saturday. But according to this forecast, with pressure at 995, this is a weak tropical storm, but it looks like it could pack a punch when it comes to rain. And it's kind of peculiar to me. Watch this system down at the bottom, guys. Check this out. So on June 7th, Sunday, we start to see the heavier rain break away from this low pressure system. This low pressure system curls to the west. The rain goes to the east. Look at that. So Miami, watch out. We've already seen record amounts of rain for May. June's going to be a heavy start for you. And then New Orleans and Beaumont, Texas, and Houston will get the brunt of this low pressure system. Right now, it looks like just moderate to heavy rain for eastern Texas, western Louisiana. But that storm jumps on shore by the 10th. And again, you guys can see where high pressure is dominating out there in the Atlantic, in the middle of the Atlantic. That high pressure system's out here, which is bringing that moisture in a big circle. And it's going to need another system up here to push this off to make this go to the east, which it will happen. But at what point? Who's going to see the heaviest amount? Right now, the South, Texas, eastern Texas, western Louisiana, parts of New Orleans, some areas here in Alabama, Mississippi will get some moderate rain. Southern Florida, though, this could be one of the rainiest summers on record. If we saw 20 inches almost in Miami at the airport for the month of May, and we already see this in our forecast, it's not looking good. Before I leave the air, I'm going to check something real quick.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform, buy a t-shirt, or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.